The world watched in horror. A monster had been unmasked. For years, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer had moved amongst us, a specter cloaked in normalcy. Behind the facade of an ordinary man lived a depraved soul, a cannibalistic serial killer whose crimes shocked even the most hardened investigator. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer extinguished 17 lives, leaving behind a trail of unimaginable carnage and grief. His name became synonymous with evil, his crimes a chilling testament to the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of normalcy. This is the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Monster. Dahmer's crimes were more than just murder. They were acts of unimaginable cruelty and depravity. He didn't merely kill his victims, he toyed with them. He dismembered them. He consumed their flesh, believing it would somehow make them a permanent part of him. Dahmer's crimes weren't simply about taking lives, they were about dominating, possessing, and ultimately consuming his victims in the most horrific way imaginable. The world struggled to understand how someone could commit such unspeakable acts. What drove Dahmer? What created this monster who walked among us? The answers, as with most things in life, are complex, woven into the fabric of a troubled childhood and a mind slowly unraveling. Dahmer's story is a descent into the abyss, a horrifying reminder that monsters aren't born, they are made. Jeffrey Dahmer's early years were far from idyllic. Born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1960, his childhood was marked by instability and emotional neglect. His parents, Lionel and Joyce Dahmer, had a volatile relationship, their constant arguments casting a pall over the household. Young Jeffrey, a sensitive and introverted child, often felt lost in the crossfire, his emotional needs largely ignored. Even in childhood there were signs of troubling behavior, a morbid fascination with death that set him apart from other children. Dahmer was drawn to dead animals, captivated by their anatomy. He collected their remains, dissecting them with a morbid curiosity that hinted at a deeply disturbed psyche. School offered little solace for the troubled youth. Dahmer was withdrawn, an outcast who struggled to connect with his peers. He found refuge in alcohol, using it to numb the pain and loneliness that gnawed at him. Pranks, often cruel and bizarre, became his way of seeking attention, a desperate cry for help that went unheeded. The seeds of darkness were sown early in Jeffrey Dahmer's life. A troubled home life, social isolation, and a burgeoning fascination with death created a fertile ground for evil to take root. The stage was set for a descent into depravity that would shock the world. The summer of 1978 marked a turning point in Jeffrey Dahmer's life, a horrific crossing of the Rubicon from which there would be no return. He was 18 years old, fresh out of high school, and living alone in his parents' house in Ohio. It was during this time that he committed his first murder, a crime as impulsive as it was brutal. His victim was Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker Dahmer had picked up. Dahmer invited Hicks back to his house for a beer, a seemingly innocuous encounter that would have deadly consequences. As Hicks prepared to leave, Dahmer, fueled by a potent cocktail of alcohol and repressed desires, struck him with a barbell. Hicks, caught completely off guard, never stood a chance. The murder sent Dahmer spiraling down a dark path. He dismembered Hicks's body in the basement, scattering the remains in the woods surrounding his house. The act of killing, far from repulsing him, seemed to awaken something dark and insatiable within him. The following years were a blur of aimless drifting and escalating depravity. Dahmer joined the army, but his alcoholism and disturbing behavior led to his discharge. He moved to Miami, where he continued to drink heavily and indulge his dark fantasies. The monster within him, unleashed that summer night in Ohio, was growing stronger, hungering for more. 1987 marked the beginning of Jeffrey Dahmer's reign of terror in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He had moved there to live with his grandmother, seeking a fresh start. But the darkness that clung to him followed. It was in his grandmother's basement that Dahmer's crimes escalated, reaching new heights of depravity and horror. Dahmer's modus operandi became chillingly consistent. He would lure young men, often gay or racial minorities, back to his apartment with promises of money or companionship. Once inside, he would drug their drinks, rendering them helpless. Then, the torture would begin. The details of Dahmer's crimes are too gruesome to fully recount here. He would strangle his victims, often while they were still alive but incapacitated. He would experiment on their bodies, attempting crude lobotomies driven by a twisted desire to create zombies, submissive sex slaves who would satisfy his every whim. He kept trophies of his victims, preserving body parts in jars filled with formaldehyde, a grotesque collection that spoke to the depths of his madness. Dahmer's apartment became a charnel house, the air thick with the stench of death. Neighbors complained about the foul odors and strange noises emanating from his apartment, but Dahmer, a master manipulator, managed to allay their suspicions, convincing them it was just the smell of spoiled food or a malfunctioning freezer. For 3 long years, Dahmer operated with impunity, his crimes hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of normalcy. The police, despite several close calls, failed to see through the mask. The monster was free to roam to kill again and again. In the annals of criminal history, there are often moments of serendipity, unexpected twists of fate that lead to the downfall of even the most cunning predators. So it was with Jeffrey Dahmer. On July 22, 1991, a young man named Tracy Edwards, slated to become Dahmer's next victim, managed to escape the monster's clutches. Edwards had been lured back to Dahmer's apartment under false pretenses. He endured hours of terror, fearing for his life as Dahmer held him captive. But Edwards, unlike Dahmer's previous victims, refused to give up hope. Seizing a moment when Dahmer was distracted, Edwards made a desperate break for freedom, fleeing into the night with Dahmer in pursuit. Edwards, shirtless and terrified, flagged down a passing police car. He told the officers a harrowing tale of his ordeal, of the handcuffs, the stench of death, and the crazed man who had held him captive. The officers, initially skeptical, agreed to accompany Edwards back to Dahmer's apartment. What they found inside would send shockwaves across the nation. The discovery of Jeffrey Dahmer's gruesome collection of human remains sent a collective shudder through Milwaukee and beyond. The world watched in horror as the full extent of his crimes came to light. The apartment, once a scene of unimaginable evil, became a macabre museum, a testament to the depths of human depravity. Dahmer, apprehended at the scene, confessed to his crimes in chilling detail. His trial, which began in January 1992, was a media spectacle, captivating the nation. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, painting a portrait of a cold, calculating killer. Dahmer's defense team, on the other hand, attempted to portray him as a deeply disturbed individual, a slave to his compulsions. The jury ultimately rejected the insanity plea, finding Dahmer guilty on 15 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, a total of 957 years in prison. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But true justice proved elusive. In November 1994, just 2 years into his sentence, Dahmer was brutally murdered by a fellow inmate at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. The man who had inflicted so much pain and suffering on others met a violent end of his own, his life extinguished before he could serve even a fraction of his sentence. Jeffrey Dahmer's reign of terror may have ended in a prison cell, but his legacy continues to haunt us. He remains one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, his name synonymous with evil, his crimes a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of normalcy. The families of Dahmer's victims have been left to grapple with the unimaginable loss and grief inflicted upon them. Their loved ones were taken from them in the most horrific way imaginable, their lives extinguished by a monster who preyed on the vulnerable. Dahmer's crimes also exposed systemic failures in law enforcement. His ability to operate undetected for so long, despite numerous red flags and close calls, raised serious questions about police competence and the ways in which marginalized communities are often underserved and unprotected. The case also ignited a national conversation about homophobia, racism, and the insidious ways in which prejudice can blind us to the suffering of others. Many of Dahmer's victims were gay men of color, and some believe their cases were not taken seriously enough by authorities because of their sexual orientation and race. In the aftermath of such unimaginable horror, the question that continues to linger is why? What drove Jeffrey Dahmer to commit such unspeakable acts? How could a human being be capable of such depravity? Psychiatrists and criminologists have offered a variety of explanations, pointing to factors such as childhood trauma, neglect, and potential neurological abnormalities. Some believe Dahmer suffered from borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, conditions characterized by instability, impulsivity, and a lack of empathy. Others have speculated about the role of sexual sadism and necrophilia in Dahmer's crimes, suggesting that he derived pleasure from inflicting pain and having sex with corpses. The gruesome details of his crimes, including his attempts to create zombies, seem to support this theory. However, the truth is that there may never be a single, satisfying answer to the question of why. The human mind, particularly in cases of extreme deviance, remains a complex and enigmatic puzzle. Dahmer himself offered few insights into his motivations, often claiming that he couldn't explain his own actions. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer is ultimately a cautionary tale, a reminder that monsters do exist, often hiding in plain sight. It forces us to confront the darkest aspects of human nature and to grapple with uncomfortable truths about our own capacity for evil. More than just a true crime story, Dahmer's case compels us to ask difficult questions about ourselves and the society in which we live. What are our responsibilities to the most vulnerable among us? How can we create a world where such horrors are less likely to occur? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are questions we must continue to ask. For in remembering Jeffrey Dahmer and the victims whose lives he stole, we owe it to ourselves and to them to learn from the darkness and to strive for a world where such evil is never again allowed to flourish. What are your thoughts?